What's going on, everyone? This is Christopher Sanchez, your favorite Chicano in politics, and you're now tuned into another episode of the Mesa Verde Group's podcast, where we bring you insights of the California State Capitol, politics, policy, with some of the best professionals working in the field on behalf of your communities across California. Joining me today are some first-timers to the podcast, Melissa Romero.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Eric Paredes.
Hey, thanks for having me here today.
And Beatriz Hernandez.
Hola, hola. So happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
And before we get started, tell us a little bit about yourself. So we'll start out with Melissa.
So I have been doing environmental advocacy for about 10 years now. I grew up in Sacramento area, actually. So I'm one of the advocates who didn't move here for the job. I grew up in the area. And it's been a long journey, but my focus really has been, I really feel like there are a lot of injustices in the way that the world works and the way that corporations take advantage of us and communities. And my work on environmental issues and climate justice has really been focused on that. So I work at California Environmental Voters. I've worked there for a while now as policy advocacy director, and my work is focused around state legislative advocacy, regulatory advocacy, and federal advocacy around climate justice.
Dang, that's a lot of work. And it sounds like it was really important that they had someone with roots because of the environment, right? Because you're working on environmental policy. Eric, what about yourself? Tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so I've been doing advocacy work for about 13 years now. I got started off working on political campaigns while in college. I did some student organizing during my time at Chico State. And then, after I graduated, I became a union organizer, organizing home care workers, and kind of left that space in 2019, jumped around, worked on some nonprofits, did some grassroots advocacy work, and then I eventually transitioned into the government relations space, doing more grassroots advocacy and policy work, and now I am a registered lobbyist advocating on higher education issues. So really my journey started off as just someone that was curious, wanted to just improve my community, did organizing, and then found my space or myself into this space doing the policy work, where I'm still able to really incorporate my organizing skills, which I think is a lot of fun a lot of the times.
Perfect. And Beatriz, what about you?
Yeah, there's so much to share, but let me try to keep it simple. I was born in Guadalajara, and I'm fully undocumented. I don't have DACA, so I'm directly impacted by the issues that I advocate for. I have been working in policy advocacy for about 5 years now. I'm not sure if that's considered to be a newbie, but maybe. But yeah, I'm involved in, like I said, in issues that directly impact my community. I'm really honored to do that work. And just like Melissa, I'm actually from Sacramento. I grew up here when we came to the States when I was 12. So I grew up in Del Paso Heights. So whoever knows Del Paso Heights, woo-hoo. I come from the hood. And then I went to Merced. So actually a lot of people think I'm from the Central Valley because I hype it up all the time. It's not much of lifted here in Sacramento. So I'm always hyping it up, the Central Valley. And I moved back a couple of years ago. So but I'm an organizer at heart. That's what I do. I like to build relationships and move people.
Well, I don't think you're a newbie anymore. 5 years is plenty of work, especially when you're working on immigrant rights, where you're just constantly fighting and advocating for our community. So that's very, very, very beautiful. Mm-hmm. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of some of the most, important topics that our listeners want to hear, we do have to do some acknowledgments and some recognizing. I want to give a big shout out to one of our new listeners, Assembly Member David Alvarez, and that's right. The Mesa Verdes podcast is kind of one of the leaders in the town and has been gaining a lot of traction. And first, Newsom started a podcast after we launched. And then clearly Mr. Alvarez was like, I want to jump in on this conversation and have a podcast too. So we're glad we were able to influence you, Mr. Alvarez. And we're thankful that you're listening now. And then some other things have been really cool happening around the Capitol. We have a new pro tem, Senator Monique Limon. She is going to be the first Latina to hold that position. Y'all have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I am very excited. I'm very excited that she's going to be our new pro tem. She's been such a huge champion on environmental justice issues and has almost every year she's been in office, she's done legislation on holding oil companies accountable for cleaning up oil wells that are no longer being used, or enforcing rules about cleaning up after oil spills and preventing oil spills. So she's really done a lot of really amazing things on climate and environmental justice. So I'm very excited for her to be in that position.
Yeah, anyone else have any other thoughts? I was able to work with her, and then on some predatory lending stuff, we were able to accomplish where folks were getting ripped off and taken advantage of, particularly Latino communities, and we got that bill signed. So clearly, she's always been on the right side of multiple issues. Eric, any thoughts from you?
Yeah, so just also excited. I think it's growing up in a small town. I realized I left out where I grew up. I grew up in Live Oak, a small farm working community, just about 50 minutes north of here, Live Oak. And I think just growing up, not seeing a lot of folks that look like me represent me at the local level it's always awesome to see Latinos in office. And I think just it sort of speaks to where we are as a state. So just excited to work with the senator. I know that she has a strong background in education, so just looking forward to continuing to work with her in that capacity.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad to hear that she's a champion in very different issues. I'm also excited that some of the partners that have had the pleasure to work with, and also with the organization that I do work for, MyCOP, which is Mixteco Indígena Community Organizing Project, they have close ties with that senator. So I'm glad that she's gonna hear from the voices of indigenous communities, which are highly represented in her district. So I'm glad to hear that she has that position of power now.
Yeah, no, it's real beautiful, and hearing that she's always had the community at heart is great. But one last thing before we get into some of the more nitty gritty. June is a really important month for a lot of different communities. As you all know, June is the month where we celebrate Pride, where we celebrate our siblings from the LGBTQ plus community. June is also when we celebrate Juneteenth, and it is also known as Immigrant Heritage Month. Does anyone have any reflections on any of those important celebrations or things that you did to uplift those communities in this month?
Yeah, I mean, I, like many people, went to the No Kings protest, and that was a very cathartic moment to be surrounded by so many people who are concerned about both the ICE raids and also just the general BS happening on the federal government side. There's a lot of work that I do in my day-to-day on this stuff, so it's not often that I do it on the weekends, but it was a moment where a community came together, and I think that there's an intersection happening in everyone's minds of how all these issues impact each other and how they're connected, and I think that's really important and really beautiful.
Yeah. So I was at the No Kings rally. I'm assuming you were at the one at the state capitol. Mm-hmm. And then, so I went with a couple friends. One, Altamirano, who's been a guest on the podcast before, and a couple of our other friends. Mo, I know you're listening. You wanted to shout out. Same with Rafa. But at one point, we let the program go. We were observers. And then we were like, we got to spice this up a little bit. So we created a dance circle. And then we were, I love that. Yeah, it was actually really cool. And then Moy was
Where was I?
You were on the other side. But Moy was actually being very mindful of bringing everybody in who looked from different walks of life and everything to the circle. People were like, I want to jump in. He's like, I got you. And he would bring them in, and the circle kind of just got bigger and bigger. And then at some point we're like, okay, we're kind of tired, so we're going to end this. And then as we ended it, everyone was like, oh, thank you for making sure we all felt included. And because we were chanting different things in Spanish, where is it cumbia si, Trump no. I think that was the most powerful chant there that day.
I haven't heard that one.
No,
that's a great chant.
Well, yeah, because you have to dance to it, right? And then people were people were saying things in Spanish, but everyone was dancing regardless of where they came from. So Eric, what about you? Did you do anything this month to uplift any of those communities that we mentioned?
Yeah, so I wasn't able to go out to any of the rallies. I did go to the one here in Sacramento before the No Kings protest. But I would just say, we, in addition to like the policy work that I do, I would just want to uplift the members of the union that I work for. I work for the California Faculty Association. That is a union of 29,000 faculty members that work in the California State University system. Our members really were engaged that weekend up and down the state, from Humboldt County down to Southern California, Central Valley, here in Sacramento. But I think just as an anti-racist social justice union, our members have been loud and clear that in this moment that we're in, they definitely want to be on the front lines, supporting our immigrant community. So personally, I wasn't out there, but our members up and down the state were out there, in solidarity.
And there was, as Melissa was mentioning, it was really beautiful to see a lot of folks come out in solidarity. And that kind of brings us to our first topic of the day. And we want to absolutely acknowledge the horrific images that everyone's been seeing, but what's been happening and impacting families across the state of California, but across the nation as well, as relates to the aggressive enforcement that the Trump administration has been doing with ICE, but not only ICE, multiple federal agencies, DEA, FBI, has literally wreaked havoc in our communities from the first day that they started enforcement with garment workers to day laborers to car wash workers. We absolutely want to recognize all the families who've been impacted and all the organizations who are on the ground right now responding to this moment. It's really important to know your rights and to share those resources with anyone. I know a lot of our organizations, even though we come from different sectors of policy, have been sharing and being responsive to this moment. But yeah, I would love to hear, some more. I know some of the professors at the CFA, at the CSUs are involved and so forth. But we'd love to hear some of your thoughts on what you're all thinking about this right now.
I mean, I would definitely say for people to, really take the time to get informed more than anything, and beyond like just reading, the Know Your Rights materials, but also role play. That is something that I have been talking about with some colleagues, because you can read all you want, right? But if, God forbids you ever do encounter like ICE enforcement, I'm pretty sure like all of the fears are going to kick in. So I would say definitely encouraging folks to role play with their family members, with, their coworkers, etc. And then also to have different plans for different environments that they might find themselves in, right? Because we know your rights may look different. Like if you encounter ICE at your job or at your home or, it's different settings. So definitely encourage folks to look really into detail on everything.
Yeah, I mean, it's been very difficult to watch everything unravel and watch the videos on social media of people being taken away from their families, taken away from their children, and I think that what it's taught me and what it's reminded me of is that everyone else's fight is also my fight, right? That's also why I'm in the work that I do. But it's also, it's frustrating because you feel like people are not recognizing the decisions that they made when they voted for Trump. I saw a video of a man who was detained by ICE as a U.S. citizen and was brought to some kind of, building and was later released. And he was being interviewed on the news saying he voted for Trump. This Latino man voted for Trump and said, "Wow, I'm really rethinking this now." And it's frustrating to feel like people knew and they didn't care. But yeah, I mean, I think to be at Beatrice's point, it's our duty to make sure that we know what to do in the situations if we were to encounter that or see someone encountering that and be able to step in and help.
Yeah, I think one other thing too is, in addition to seeing community respond so positively, capturing not necessarily capturing these images, but documenting for like trying to make sure folks have their names so they could try to pass them on to legal service providers and so forth. But I think the other thing too is that we all work in policy, and we all push legislators, and we're seeing some legislators kind of be very bold in this moment. And then the question to y'all is kind of like, what are you all seeing? Do you from whether it be state electeds or federal or local electeds, and what do you think are some opportunities maybe in policy that we can take advantage of right now?
Well, I know that we're going to talk about this later, but I think that our state leaders really need to have more of an intersectional vision on how we solve the problems. And I know we're going to talk about it about the budget, but some of the things that were being proposed to be cut in the budget for undocumented people in California, environmental groups have solutions for. So I'm excited to get into that because the way I want to answer this is we need our state leaders to actually connect the dots and address these issues in an intersectional way because our world isn't siloed in issues.
Yeah, I think it's definitely nice to see a lot of the legislators coming out and support and speaking out what the terrible things that we're seeing across the state. But as much as I want to be positive about it, I also want to point out that it may come out a little bit can't pronounce the word hypocritical, because sometimes I feel like they don't walk the talk. Is that how the saying goes?
Yeah.
I know like Governor Newsom, for instance, like all of his social media right now, it's pointed out immigrants and like, oh my gosh, I'm like the face of like the rescuer, the saver of immigrants, right? And to know that he like vetoed a lot of good legislation that was very much needed for immigrants, like Safety Net for All, right, which would make sure that undocumented immigrants have access to like an employment insurance, something that they don't have. Like if they were to lose their job, like what are they going to access? They don't have any money. And the fact that, there's that legislation and other similar legislation out there, and that him and other legislators didn't support, it's very disappointing and frustrating because right now I think is just like the trend right now. It's what's hot and everybody's jumping on it. I'm seeing legislators that I didn't even know spoke Spanish are speaking Spanish right now.
Wow.
I'm like, where was this Spanish? Where was this language accessibility before? You know what I mean? So definitely, gotta step it up. It's more than just getting your little photos and speaking out. We gotta see that in policy as well.
Yeah, and I would just add, now I think more than ever is a time to be bold. I think a lot about what my president at CFA says, Margarita Berta Avila, first Latina president of CFA. Shout out to Margarita. But Margarita, it was right after the election, she said to me, now is the time to not sit on the sidelines. Like, we have to be at the forefront of the issues, right? So I think now's the time to do that. I know we're going to talk about the budget, but I think one of the things that a lot of folks are talking about is, now that California is the fourth largest economy in the world, right? And everyone's excited about that, talking about it. But when I think about that, I also like to remind myself that it's of no coincidence that it's the fourth largest economy. It was built on the backs of our immigrant community, right? So I think during a time when our communities need it the most, now is not the time to forget about the people that built this state and are continuing to run our economy. So I just want to mention that now is the time to be bold, to take action, and really just do the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely, and totally agree. And we do keep it real on this podcast often, and that's our job as advocates. Like, we got to hold politicians accountable, right? There's nothing wrong with that. We're doing our job, and we're going to let you know if you're doing yours or not doing yours. But it's clear that we're all itching to talk about the budget. And so this budget is really critical to a lot of communities because in addition to it being a statement of values, it is literally what funds California and how we operate. And unfortunately, in this budget, there are going to be some cuts that will impact community. And then so we'd love to hear from y'all on the issue areas that you oversee and kind of work on. What are we seeing in this budget? And just for our listeners to know, where we're at in the process is that the governor, last time we were here, we talked about his May revise. Now the legislature has responded to his May revise and has sent him a budget on before June 15th. So I think it was the 13th. He has until July 1st. So we're recording this on June 20th. But he has till July 1st to sign the budget. We're hearing that conversations are continuing. But yeah, we'd love to start off with Melissa to see what are some things, some key highlights of the budget that you want to talk about.
Yeah, so for key highlights, I would first start off by talking about how last November, voters in California passed a climate bond with over 60% or about 60% of voters supporting that, which is really a big deal. And I think that the legislature and the governor should be reminded of that and remember that voters do really want to see investments in community resilience and climate action. So that funding that is being allocated based on that has been pushed off to later in the year. So has the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund allocations, which is from the state's cap and trade program. The funds from that are not being allocated right now. The decisions are being made later in the year. There was a decision to backfill the general fund with $500 million from that Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. So, of course, that means less for climate action. But it is less than what the governor had proposed, which was $1.5 billion originally to backfill the general fund using Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. So while it is less, it is still a significant amount, and that overall means less for climate. We've seen this pattern since 2022 when the state had this massive, massive amount of money in the budget. Mm-hmm. There were promises made on important issues that are wildly popular amongst voters that continue to be rolled back year after year. And climate typically is one of the first things on the chopping block when it's time to cut things. But of course, we're seeing a lot of issues take some really big hits this year. So the legislature really has, done that in addition to some other cuts related to things like community solar programs and offshore wind infrastructure programs. Some of that's being backfilled by that Prop 4 climate bond funding. But there are some important things that are being funded. So I don't want to gloss over the really good things.
Yeah.
Which I think people should think about these as connected to their quality of life and issues that are really important. I'll just name a few. So $35 million was shifted over to the lead acid battery cleanup fund, which is cleaning up residential sites and properties that were contaminated with lead in Vernon, California, from an the Exide lead acid battery recycling facility. So that's important work that, of course, that should not have happened. And that's another issue. That's a whole other, we could talk about that, but
it's a whole other podcast.
It's a whole other podcast. But it is really important that the state is funding that cleanup. And there's, positions being funded at the public water system, safe drinking water state revolving fund to do things like federal reporting and management of tracking lead in our drinking water. That's extremely important for our health and for communities' health who have lead in their water, which Sacramento is one of those, believe it or not.
Dang.
So, $12 million to the Coastal Conservancy to have more public access to the beach, to coastal resources. Very, very important for communities to have access to nature, which is very healing for us. And, we come together in community, coming to the beach, going to nature. So really important things. There's a $260,000 going to the San Joaquin Conservancy Fund to fulfill the Access for All legislation, which is about access for all people to nature. And importantly, there's for the California Environmental Protection Agency, the Air Resources Board, and the State Water Board, they've requested overall total of $2.98 million for positions to defend California's environmental laws from federal challenges. So that is happening, of course. We're seeing Trump and Congress trying to roll back environmental protections and clean air, clean water protections. So very important for the state agencies to be doing that work of defending those laws.
And definitely want to highlight, Vernon, California, Southeast LA, and even though it's in the town, the city of Vernon, it's neighboring cities, Bow, Cudahy, right, Maywood, they're all right there, so all impacted, but absolutely super important, right, happening, the contamination happening in Latino communities. So it's not only like it's great, but it's like a responsibility from the state that they have to fund this. And then just lastly, I don't think people really understand when it comes to public access for beaches and outdoors, like that issue is like super like important for Latinos. That it pulls super well with Latino voters and Californians specifically. I think there was a poll done by PPIC related to public access for beaches specifically, saying like this is an issue we care about. So it's good to see that like there is a response to when it comes to the environment, some of the priorities for Latino Californians. That's great. Eric, what's going on in education?
Yeah, so I think when the governor introduced his budget in January, all of us freaked out, right? We did at CFA. The governor's budget included a 7.95% cut, an ongoing cut, to the CSU and also the UCs. For the CSU, that is equivalent to about a little over $375 million. So his May revise reduced that to a 3% ongoing, and the budget bill that was just sent to the governor actually eliminated all of those cuts, which I think is a huge win for everyone. I'm not going to say for us, but for everyone. However, there is what is happening is there's actually a deferral, which means that the 3% that they were going to get cut, they're just going to get it in the next fiscal year, 26-27. So good news, they're getting the money back. I think, we were freaking out because we've seen layoffs up and down the state. Sonoma State saw literally programs get eliminated. I think it was like almost 25% of faculty members just given layoff notices. So for us, it's a relief knowing that, we get to, keep some jobs, that the quality of education for our students won't decrease. So we're obviously continuing to do advocacy as negotiations are still ongoing. So, yeah, I think it's a win for I think all of us, right? Seeing that those cuts are being eliminated.
And it's really important to note, aside from the community colleges, when it comes to the 2 or 4 year systems, the CSU is where the majority of Latino students go, and then so any cuts that you're all fighting against is clearly going to benefit Latino communities because that's where the bulk of our students go. So it's great. Let's hope the governor comes through and he recognizes what the legislature is trying to do to protect our folks. And now I think one of the issues that's been at the highlight, because it's been the biggest cut, unfortunately, to healthcare. Beatriz, tell us what's going on.
Yeah, I was about to say that I have the most depressing part of the budget here. It has been a really unfolding saga that has been happening over this past few months that really show that our state doesn't really have the best of interests when it comes to immigrant health equity. So a lot of advocates were looking at the proposed January budget to see if there was going to be any cuts to Medi-Cal, right? Because we know that the federal government has had its eyes or still has its eyes on human and healthcare services and slashing a lot of the programs for Californians and reducing the amount of funds that they give us. Thankfully, the governor didn't make any cuts and the proposed budget in January, so we were very relieved. But we were hoping that, I was hoping that he also had, suggestions for revenue to make sure that we were, taxing the rich or something around those lines. Then it came the May revise, and then that's when we saw a lot of the proposed cuts that he had for Medi-Cal, particularly for those who were undocumented, and all of the work that has gone into the Health for All campaign, which is to ensure that everyone, regardless of immigration status, has access to health insurance. And we started this work. Well, the Health for All folks started this work, and I've been part of this. It started almost a decade ago to try to get undocumented immigrants access to health care. And we made a lot of progress over the years, starting in 2015, kids who didn't have access, didn't have status, had access to Medi-Cal. Then in 2020, young adults, and then 2021, older adults. And then the remaining to close the gap at all cross fronts and everyone, regardless of their age, was in 2024, with those between 26 and 49 years old had access to status. So it was a huge win, right? We were celebrating. California was really leading the way nationwide to have, health for all. However, and, Newsom was very much, pride himself in that. However, he made a couple of proposed cuts, and now I'm going to take you all to what has come in the agreement, right, with the joint agreement between the senators, assembly members, and the governor. And what we're facing now, I'm going to name some of the cuts. So it's enrollment freeze for those with UIS ages 19 and over. So by UIS, I mean people with unsatisfactory immigration status. So again, no immigration status, but I'm also talking about people that have DACA, TPS holders, other visa holders as well. So starting in 2026, if you're not enrolled in Medi-Cal, and you're 19 and above, you're not going to be able to access the care that you need. So those folks are going to have to rely on emergency rooms and other type of community clinics. So that's really depressing to see. The other thing that they came up with, and the May revise, Governor Newsom was proposing to charge folks individually per person $100 monthly premiums for the folks who are 19 and 59. Now, what we saw in the budget that just came out, it went down, not from $100, but $30, right? So yes, although, it went, quote unquote, I guess, right? Because it's $30 instead of $100. We did. They're creating now a two-tier system, right? Which is saying, if you have this type of status, we're going to charge you. And again, I'm talking about folks even who have DACA, TPX, etc. So starting in 2027, if you are in that age bracket, 19 to 59, you're going to be charged $30 a month for your health coverage. So you can imagine, for folks that have a family of 5, that can easily add up. And, and I just want to paint the picture, because I know for a lot of us, $30, it may not seem like a lot, right? We pay kind of bills like that for phone bills, etc., right? And thankfully, myself, I'm fully undocumented, like I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast. But thankfully, I've gotten to a point where, regardless of my status, I have been able to enter to a career where I'm getting paid more than the minimum wage, right? But if we think about family members who are only earning $40,000 a year or less, $30 a month is a lot. Especially right now with cost of living is super high. I just want to mention how right now I'm helping my parents rent a home, and they're asking for 3 times the rent. Everybody has to have a good credit score. You know what I'm talking about? So it's so hard right now to live in this state, in California, and to charge people $30 to access the care that they need. That should be a human right for everyone. Is just unbelievable. And then also they want to eliminate full scope dental benefits starting in 2027. So like I mentioned, it's back to the point that we made at the beginning. It's great to see legislators and the governor standing up for immigrants, but then seeing the policies reflect this, it's not matching. The math is not mathing there. But I do also want to highlight, though, that the Senate is proposing to look into large employers like Walmart, who may have employers, for a reason they don't pay them enough, right? So those workers that don't earn a lot, they do qualify for Medi-Cal. So they have a bunch of people on Medi-Cal, right? So the Senate is proposing that that they impose a contribution from large employers with employees on Medi-Cal, to look into ways to try to balance the budget and have some type of revenue, right? I love that. I'm glad that they're finally looking into solutions, because if they knew that the federal government had its eyes on us, right? I'm just so frustrated that the governor and the legislature did not look for options of revenue starting in January. And then now they're saying, yeah, we're going to look into other options to increase revenue. We're going to look into large employers until 2027. How come they don't start these conversations now? I don't know what they're thinking. Lives are on the line and people are being taken away. I just don't think this is the time to start these conversations into 2027. They should be starting now.
I absolutely agree. I think no one's healthcare should be played with.
Yeah.
And as you're mentioning, like, I think one thing to highlight for folks is Medi-Cal's an income eligible program. Mm-hmm. So that means you make so much money, right? And so, like you said, $30 could be a big difference to a lot of folks. Exactly. An additional $30 out of your pocket. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, and thank you for sharing that. I think I share the same sentiments, right? I think we all do. It's really frustrating to see that. I feel honored to have worked on some Health for All work and in other jobs as well. I love that. And I remember, like, in 2021 when I was working for the Clinics Association, we saw that as a huge win. Yeah. And I remember going to tell all my tios and tias, like, hey,
sign up for Medicare.
This is what we have accomplished. And then seeing these proposals, it just seems like we are taking steps back, right? And just like I touched earlier, we can celebrate fourth largest economy in the world, but does that really mean anything when the very people that have built that economy are being left out? And I want to go back to what you said. Sure, $30 might not seem like a lot, right? But when you really put that into faces, real people, I think a lot about the people in my very own community, who are farm workers. A lot of people that I used to work in the fields back in the day when I was in high school and college, and I worked with a lot of families who were undocumented and did not make a lot of money, right? I think right now they're paying like $20 or something to fill the bin, when you're out there picking peaches. That's a lot of work. It's a lot of work for those of us that have done that type of work. Yeah. So to expect families of 4 or 5 to now be paying $120 plus a month, for example, that's a lot of money for folks who are just getting by, right? And I think it's just, when you think of even the numbers, it actually costs the state more when you don't give people the opportunity to have their preventative care, right? And they just go to emergency rooms. So just as CFA, we are there with our immigrant communities. We signed on to the letter as well. So we also understand that a lot of our students that go to the CSUs, their families are, they come from mixed status families, and that impacts them and their ability to finish their education.
Yeah, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the compounding impacts of how all of these issues impact each other, and the degrading of the Environmental Protection Agency, for example, to enforce laws about toxic pollution going into our water, going into our food, going into our air. And then on top of that, compounding that with a large portion of the population no longer having access to health care. Right. What does that mean for their future and their families and their children? We talked a little bit earlier about the Exide battery recycling facility and how it contaminated an entire community with lead. There are children who have developmental issues because they were exposed to lead at a young age. And the federal government is now degrading our Environmental Protection Agency and the enforcement for these corporations to not pollute our communities. And they're also reducing food benefit programs. So it's the compounding effects of all of these things that really are something that people should be upset and concerned about and be demanding our leaders to do more on.
Yeah, absolutely. And, as advocates, I'm sure you hear often like, "Oh, I can only do so much," and you know, because we're always constantly knocking at the door of them, you're like, you have to do so much more. But let's just be honest, like that now is the time, that emergency that we've all been waiting for, that crisis. Like we're living it right now, and so we got to be, as advocates, we're creative. We need you to be creative too and think outside the box and not just think in a couple years about funding. Where, you know, great those conversations happen. We got to think today, tomorrow, tonight. But that kind of leads us into our next piece, which is more like, what are you all saying about the budget? What are some of your partners saying about the budget? What are some responses you're hearing? Would love to hear more from you all.
Yeah, so I think specifically our members were hopeful. We're excited, right, that the cuts have been reduced. And just want to highlight all the work that has gone into it. You know, our members for the past 6 months have been mobilizing on the ground at the campus level, from postcards, voter voice campaigns, in-district lobby meetings, coming up to Sacramento, and just it's been really 6 months of nonstop advocacy. So I think for us, one of the things that we are saying is, let's not celebrate just yet, right? Because it's in the hands of the governor. We don't know what's going to happen, but I think folks are hopeful and feeling a lot better because, you know, when you talk about layoffs, it's not just the word layoffs, right? It's people's lives. It's their ability to put food on the table and provide for their families. So I'll just mention that folks are hopeful and sort of just eagerly awaiting to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think advocates on this side for Health for All definitely looking into like a deeper long-term strategy. We know that this is going to be an ongoing fight. And then also looking, like I mentioned, like into that revenue conversation, because we already had advocates in the space, including myself, have already met a million times with offices. And some of the things that we heard was like, you know, they kind of threw the ball at the governor or at the federal government saying like, well, he's the one that came up with the proposed cuts, or like the tariffs, or we're in a budget deficit, etc. So I think we were, as much as we already pushed and we try to show them like the impacts that it was going to have on the undocumented community and etc. They already know the stories. They already know everything. So right now, I think they're just looking for solutions that they're in office. They should be the ones coming up with the solutions, right? But we know that we have to step it up and have to hold them accountable. And if advocates have to be the ones to come out with those creative solutions, then we're gonna do whatever we can to do that. But I also want to highlight something that I think is really alarming to me. The fact that, I don't know if y'all heard, but Senator Menjivar, who publicly, spoke out against these cuts and saying that she was going to vote against this budget, she was removed out of the chair of Senate Budget Subcommittee number 3 on Health and Human Services. And then we recently heard that Assemblymember Arambula, who has been a champion for Health for All and has led the bills on Health for All, was also removed out of his seat. He was the only Democrat who voted against this bill when it came to the floor. So that says a lot. And I'm glad that people, like I said, I know that I'm not a newbie in policy, but I still have a lot to learn. And I'm guessing there's a reason why legislators have to stick to their party and like I'm pretty sure there's more to that. But whatever it is, I'm just so happy, and it's an honor, and I applaud them, Senator Menjivar and Assembly Member Arambula, for really standing up, even if it meant that they have to part ways with their party. Because at the end of the day, I don't think it comes to party, it comes to your values, and it comes to what you were selected to be in office for. So shout out to them.
And I just briefly want to correct you slightly, and because
please correct me. I'm not.
Senator Durazo voted no
on
the budget bill as well.
So both. Okay, I'm glad that we have more than one.
Yeah. And then, from my understanding, I'm trying to look at it. Yeah, Senator Durazo was a no vote. Senator Menjivar didn't vote for it as well. And then she was removed as a committee member of the subcommittee.
Yeah.
And then when you remove somebody from the budget committee, like Senator Menjivar, who represents the San Fernando Valley, you're literally removing our voice. Like Latino voters put her in. And then to think about the community she represents, she's a member of the LGBT caucus, right?
Yeah.
So like you're removing so many important voices in such a critical committee. It's like, why would you do that to us? You took away our voice. She was one of the people who had our voice there. But yeah, it's good to see people kind of pull away.
Yeah, I'll just quickly also say on Senator Menjivar, she has been a huge champion on climate issues. She authored the Polluters Pay Superfund Act this year, and she's someone who EnviroVoters supported very early on in her race. She was the underdog, and she's clearly come out as a amazing leader for the community that she represents. So, that just goes back to the intersectionality of the issues, and the leaders that are going to be bold are doing all of it, which is amazing. So I'll talk about EnviroVoters' feelings on the budget and my feelings on the budget. Overall, it is disappointing that there's really a lack of proactive vision from our state leaders. And there is right now an affordability crisis that is being driven in a big part by the climate crisis. And I don't think that our state leaders are really recognizing that. These are the same industries who are responsible for the climate crisis that are price gouging us at every chance that they get. And, I'll talk about a little bit, the LA wildfires, is an example of where there was a loss of over $297 million of local, people missing work and local businesses. There's a cost to this stuff. It's not made up. It's not far away. It's not just icebergs, far away from us. Climate change increases food prices. It increases inflation by 0.92 to 3.3 percentage points globally. So this is real. This is real cost to our lives. We're all going to have increases to either mortgages or rent, whichever you pay, because of the LA fires. So, the way that insurance works is we all pay. And our landlords are going to get an increase in their insurance, and then we're all going to pay more rent because of a disaster, an unnatural disaster that should not have happened. So, the environmental community and EnviroVoters, we have solutions for new revenue. Like I mentioned, things like ending corporate tax loopholes, the Water's Edge tax election, which allows corporations to not count some of their offshore, money in their taxes for California, and ending that so that we have more funding. And the benefit of that is that if we were able to implement that, you would be able to take the pressure off of the general fund, right? Because it's not just that we're saying, we should fund climate stuff. Mm-hmm. It's like, yes, we should fund climate action and community resilience, but then all the money that was used for that in the general fund, we can use for other things. So it's more for everyone, right? Mm-hmm. It's like this huge benefit that our opposition, corporations, have convinced everyone is controversial. And then, I mentioned Senator Menjivar's Polluters Pay Superfund Act. This is a solution that would also fund a lot of the climate resilience work and the worker transition and the clean energy and the clean water and the clean air and all the things we need, again, relieving the pressure from the general fund so that issues that are important to us in California, education, immigrant rights, and, healthcare and all of these things, we can fund them. It's like we have these solutions and we just need the political will to actually get them done.
That's absolutely correct. And I think, one thing I left out of the conversation about what's in the budget is that when it came to immigration legal services, there wasn't an increase to some of the requests that were being made by immigrant legal service organizations. There was an increase to provide funding for unaccompanied minors who are going to go to court facing their own. I apologize, I forget the exact amount, but there was some funding in the legislature's version of the budget. So let's make sure that the governor signs it. And then so kind of going on what Melissa was stating, the unfortunate part when we're doing advocacy for for the budget is that a lot of folks are telling us, oh, well, when it comes to immigrant rights, do you want to fund legal services or healthcare? Because they're like, it's the same pot, right? Talking about the competing of dollars. And we're like, you can do both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can tax corporations and wealthy people in California and do all of it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I was like, thank you so much, Melissa, for highlighting that everything's interconnected. And now I'm like, I gotta tell the org that I work for, let's connect with environmental voters, because that's where it's at. If y'all have solutions, like, let's talk more about that.
Yeah.
Oh, I think we all have solutions in this.
Yeah.
Whether they want to hear our solutions is a different story.
Right.
Yeah, but we're doing our job because some of the solutions, some are getting in there, or at least being considered or talked about, right? So what is it? And then just the other thing I'll add on like kind of responses, we have been immigration legal service organizations have been advocating for additional funding since January, right? Even after the special session. And then we're like, things are going to get bad in California. People need representation. And then now this is happening during budget conversations. And we're getting responses from some folks, and it's just not what we need right now. The response that we're hearing, I think, there's a missed opportunity. And I'll just say one thing that was on my mind is that, there was, some of you may know that if you amend, when the legislature puts a bill in print, it can't be voted on, no action can be taken for 72 hours. Mm-hmm. And then so as a result, in order to meet the June 15th deadline, the budget bill was put in print like on Tuesday or Monday or something like that, right? And they voted it on Friday. And Friday before they put it in print was the first day of the aggressive enforcement by the federal government on immigrants, right? They absolutely could have amended that bill to increase funding, and it is, and from my perspective, it should have been the responsibility to respond in that moment, to be like,
right, hey,
you know what, guys, sorry, we're gonna work on a Saturday, or we're gonna work on a Sunday, because like we have to represent Californians, and today enforcement hasn't stopped since then. So I think that's another piece. It's like, some of the responses we're looking at is like, as we continue to advocate for that funding, or there's this missed opportunity that we have. Fortunately, the CHIRP program had some additional dollars that were put in there, but there's a lot more that's needed. Wanted to see if there's any other comments around or responses or thoughts that you had as we're just kind of flowing around on the budget.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just quickly add that, as it was mentioned, everything is connected, right? And as all of us are advocating, trying to just get our items in there, I just want to make a note that, while some, and I'm not saying any of us here, but while some might think, these are competing priorities, et cetera, when it comes to our communities, they're not. And when I spoke to my president, Margarita, about, what was being proposed for like the Medi-Cal for undocumented folks, and then also what we were seeing for higher ed, she quickly said, no, we can have it all. This is not the time to be quiet just so we can get our funding. This is a time where we're going to advocate together, because just as we deserve the funding for higher ed, so do our undocumented communities on the healthcare space, for example. So it's been really a challenge advocating these last couple months, but it's also just been really beautiful just to come together and say, even though I'm advocating for higher ed, I'm also there with y'all too, for the folks advocating for health for all. So just, I think a lot about how sometimes it feels like we're being pinned against each other, right? Like, competing against each other. But no, I think in these moments, we all deserve that funding, and just want to highlight that, because in these difficult moments, I think it's where we all need to come together and continue the advocacy for one another.
Beautifully stated. And so before we close out this podcast, we always have a moment for advocates to share their final thoughts. We'll start this way, and then I'll close. Beatriz, please share some of your final thoughts.
Yes. I don't know if this is a naive thought, but I think it would be great if all advocates across issue areas and organizations, we came together and we put up a proposal that it's time to tax the rich.
Eric?
Yeah, just the only thing I'll add is I know that folks or listeners might be super experienced in this space, or you might be a college student just wanting to get into this space. As I was thinking how I'm going to close, I would just say that I like to use the analogy of like the puzzle, right? You have the big puzzle and you have individual puzzle pieces, right? So I would just say to folks listening in, we all have a role in this moment, right? Whether you're, the policy wonk who's out there doing direct negotiation, or whether you're someone on the ground who's just getting started, we all have a place in this movement. So just always remember that it doesn't matter. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have 20 years of experience. You all have a role in this moment.
Wow. This has been a really wonderful conversation. I love this so much. I just want to say, again, we have the solutions. We just need the political will. So let's go do it. Mm-hmm. Let's get it done. Because we literally have no other choice.
That's right. And well, thank you for those words and thoughts. As some of you know, I'm an oldies kind of person, and dedications are something that is part of my culture. And today I'd like to use this moment to dedicate this episode to one of my first mentors, who I had when I got involved in community politics back home in Fullerton. I want to dedicate this episode to Dr. Richard Ramirez, who was laid to rest on May 20th of this year. I met Dr. Ramirez when we defended the Chicano murals in Fullerton and on Lemon Street. As a mentor, he had always been supportive of what I wanted to do and never told me no, and he never tried to take advantage of me and my talents for his own benefit or personal projects. One of my memories with him was when I was being sworn in as student trustee in the North Orange County Community College District to represent Fullerton College. He and a handful of OGs from the Los Amigos group of Orange County came to watch me get sworn in. And it threw everyone at the college district off, because if Dr. Ramirez and the Amigos were there, that means something had gone wrong. And they came unannounced. So people were confused. But this time, they were there because they wanted to show their support for me, because they were proud to see me grow. Thank you, Dr. Ramirez, for being one of the first people to believe in me. Today, the town I live in is lonely. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Mesa Verde Group's podcast, where you can listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else where you listen to a podcast. Make sure to follow us on social media to continue to be updated about what the latest happenings in California policy and politics. All views and opinions expressed today are of the individual guests and not of their employer or their affiliates unless otherwise expressed.